Okay, today is December 2nd, Parshat Vayetzei, December 2nd, 2024. Parshat Vayetzei. Before we begin, just over these 420 some days of captivity, uh, if you watch our Parsha talk, we've been referring to Omer Nutra. Omer Nutra was a student who grew up on Long Island. He was my colleague, Rabbi Chesler, taught him at Solomon Schechter Day School of Long Island. And today the IDF announced that in fact he had been killed on October the 7th. We don't know, of course, how they determined that and what the intelligence is, but it was a devastating piece of information for for us, for the community, and of course for his parents. And his parents have been, you know, advocating for the hostages since the beginning. But you can just imagine how awful this is. It goes on, and we, of course, we want to remember them and want to make sure that nobody forgets them. So that's just a sad note as we start. We are talking about Parshat Vayetzei, and as we get into this parsha, um, I want to kind of frame the thinking here about Jacob and his father and his mother. Jacob's father Isaac and his mother Rebekah, and think about the relationships that are in existence here, the difficulties, the challenges, etc., and specifically what they say to him at the end of last week's parsha, which we're going to get into in a second. But just to kind of backtrack for a second, um, I mentioned in one of the presentations, either in the parsha sheet or the parsha talk or in last week's class, when Jacob steals the birthright from, he doesn't steal, when he kind of purloins the birthright, buys the birthright, or has the Esav sell the birthright to him, we could read that as a kind of an act out of frustration. I'm putting forth this reading, which is that it's clear to him that Esav is not worthy, and that Esav is the wild of the two, and that for this serious covenant to come down, Esav is totally inappropriate to him. I want to kind of put a parenthesis here. If you see the movie A Real Pain, the Jesse Eisenberg movie, which is out now, if you're going to movies at all, anybody who goes to movies, I don't know if that's, we went to see that movie a week or two ago. And it's a very interesting movie because we have these two characters, they're cousins, uh, uh, and they are grandchildren of a survivor, of the grandmother's a survivor, and they go on this journey to their town, the town of the grandmother, which is near Lublin, um, and they want to see the grandmother's house. It's a really interesting movie. They're not brothers, but they are cousins. They are kind of brotherly. And why I'm saying this is because one of the brothers is a kind of, family man, with a conventional life, notwithstanding a little OCD. And the other brother is a wild person. He smokes and drinks a lot, and he's got no responsibilities. And this reminded me of the Jacob and Esav story, that in some ways, Esav, because he's 100, because he's wild, he doesn't take to any kind of abstract ideas or realities or responsibilities. Um, and this is already seen early on. Um, you know, Anybody could see that in their sibling, even from the earliest age. And certainly you would think that the parents see that. Um, the mother, I think, sees that. The father doesn't see that. The father runs the family, and it's in that family system that there's a tremendous degree of frustration because there's something that has to happen in that family system, namely the covenant needs to be passed down. And if it's going to be passed down according to the rule of the firstborn, it's going to fail. And so I'm reading this story now with a sense of tremendous frustration on the part of Jacob, who sees that his father, and I have a certain affinity to the character, but Isaac is kind of constricted. He's flawed in the sense that he can't move beyond himself. He can't take matters into his own hands the way he really ought to have under the circumstances. And so Jacob moves the story forward by buying the birthright, and then Rebekah moves the story forward by making sure that Jacob gets the blessing. And already at that point, and I'm just going to mute this sound here, already at that point, there is Isaac is blind. And we are always quick to comment that Isaac may be physically blind, but he's also blind to the realities. And that, of course, is what we are seeing here. And it's in that frustration of the family system where the father, who has to move things from the generation to next generation, is unable to do so. And therefore Rebecca has to manipulate the situation in order to wrest from that situation the outcome that she wants. Now, in a modern, one second, then in a modern family, I mean, and it would require an exceptional, courageous, I think, honest family where lines of communication were open with everybody. They would all sit down. Maybe they'd have a mediator or a therapist or someone to say, we have a problem. The problem is we have this huge responsibility of transferring the covenant to the next generation. And Asa, if you're not, well, it's a we want to relieve you of this duty because you're not suited for it. Now, there's probably a nicer way to say that, okay? But my assumption is that a person like Asa would have been relieved that pressure would not have been placed upon him, okay, and that it would have been doing him a favor, okay. So it's in that situation which then moves to calamity because of all the subterfuge. Rebecca is stealthful in disguising Jacob as his brother, preparing the food, and getting the blessing to him from Isaac. And then it's at that point that when that blessing is discovered and Esav is completely anguished by that, and that Esav says, let the days of my father's mourning be completed, and I will kill my brother, which is a way of saying I've been victimized by him, and I will compensate for that by it doesn't say murder, but I will kill. All right, so we had a couple of questions. First Nanette, then Susie. Go ahead. You have to unmute, okay?
Okay. So, hey, Rabbi, I hear you. It's all well and good. But listen, wasn't it like last Parsha or maybe two Parshas ago that God told Rebecca, who was barren at the time, don't worry, you're going to have two nations, you're going to carry two nations.
Yes.
So, I hear what you're saying, but wasn't this all predetermined by God?
Well, that is the question, and uh, if we read closely, and we're not going to, but if we read what was said to her in that oracle, uh, it's not exactly clear who's going to be the one to serve the other. It says the older will serve, or the younger will serve the older. So it depends how you punctuate the sentence. as to who is the object and who is the subject. Um, the, the important point of the oracle is that, exactly as you said, they're two nations, and that they will be in conflict, right? What she experienced, I mean, it's almost like saying, you know, I'm suffering in this pregnancy. It's a difficult pregnancy. I go to the oracle. What use does it? It didn't give me any information there. It just told me that I have two twins in my womb. I'm carrying twins, and that they're going to struggle afterwards. You know, a grace gedilla. You know, you told me nothing new here. Okay, so but the question as to what's preordained and what's not, I think is a question that governs a lot of these stories. And we're going to return to that theme a little later. Go ahead, Susie.
Yeah, so you said that Esau was probably relieved that he wasn't going to have this responsibility, and yet, he's mad.
Yeah. Sorry about that. Say again.
Yeah. So you said that Esau was relieved that he wouldn't have this responsibility,
Yes.
and on what do you base that, given that he gets mad?
You know, there's a way and there's a way. I mean, he has every reason to be mad under the circumstances, okay? And the circumstances are awful, right? Look, and I would even say more so, which is he's not mad that he doesn't get that blessing. Or he's not mad that he doesn't get a blessing. He's mad at the blessing that his father gives him. When you read the story, it occurs to me, at the end of last week's Parsha, that I mean, of all the things that Isaac could have said to Esau, he could have said something nicer, okay? And and in the lead up to that blessing, he puts Asaph through tremendous anguish. I find the thing that Asaph says here, it's hard not to feel a tremendous degree of sympathy for him, which is he says, "Habracha achat, do you only have one blessing?" You know, that's the indictment. That's a charge. That any parent should recoil at hearing that from a child, which is, okay, so you said this to that child and you have nothing nice to say to me? He's absolutely right. And he's absolutely right to be hurt. And he's absolutely right to feel, the anguish there. And it's like, okay, I get it. It's like, I understand I'm not the person best suited to run this business. Okay. But you don't have to be cruel to me. And that's what he's reacting to, I think. That's what he's doing. Okay. Any other questions? Anything to, okay. So let's go into the text at the beginning here. And I will,
Can I just ask a
go ahead.
question,
Sure. Yes.
Rabbi, that
Yes.
occurs to me? What exactly did the birthright entail? That is, you think of it these days as maybe, I don't know, the elder gets all the financial holdings and land and cattle and so on, and that's what is at stake, or does it really have to do with the covenant, or both, or other things? In other words, was it all or none between the firstborn and the others typically? Is that what's at stake here?
So the answer is it could be all of the above. Okay. There is a question among, people who look at that, the scholars and the commentators. Exactly, they're asking the same question, which is what does he get here? Now, as the firstborn in the Bible and biblical culture are always entitled to a double portion. Um, and that probably had to do with the fact that there was an assumption that the firstborn would take over from the whatever it was that the family was in, right? I mentioned I made reference to the Papermans, okay? Stanley is a Montrealer. So, it's a family business, the funeral business. It goes from father to son to son to son, right? And who would inherit it? Okay, so, typically, the it's the whole next generation gets a portion of it. But what if, a person in that next generation is not predisposed to being in the business, okay? So the conventions in biblical society made the assumption that this decision would not have to be made. It would automatically go to the firstborn, and that everybody else would have to kind of function because everybody, the assumption is that everybody else would make their own family, but that the firstborn had an allegiance to the family. Now it gets complicated because God has per, the prerogative of the firstborn, right? So early on in biblical society, it was the firstborn that was supposed to serve in the temple or supposed to serve in the Mishkan. But that obviously it was completely unwieldy because it would destroy families, and the Bible opts to maintain families at the expense of God. Right? God doesn't get your firstborn, to keep families intact. Instead, what happens is we get a whole institution of a priesthood through a family clan. So, what was the birthright? The title, basically, and it would be, to get the title, to get all of that, and to have those rights transferred to you for compensation. And what people like Nahum Sarna in his commentary on the Book of Genesis, he says that this was actually not uncommon, that there are some documents from cultures parallel to the Hebrews in which you have these kinds of negotiations where offspring would negotiate their birthrights for whatever reason. Now, we could come up with a lot of reasons why that would happen, and uh, you know one scenario that could be the alternate scenario here is that, like I said, Asaph realizes I'm not interested. I'm not interested in the covenant. I'm not interested. And of course, later Judaism makes that perfectly clear. They're murderous. They have lots of nasty things to say about Asaph and his descendants. I'm not interested in the covenant. I don't want the covenant. What do you want for it? Okay, that would be it. That would have been another play. Or another scenario would have been a responsible parent here would have taken in the initiative and say, we have a situation, sons, we have this covenant. It's clear, Esav, I need to discuss this with you. And is it something that you're interested in? What's involved? Well, it means you have to live this kind of life and you have to restrict yourself and da 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 da. No, I'm not interested. Okay, Jacob, you interested? Yes. Okay. Marlene, go ahead.
But we read that when he's famished, he doesn't stop for even a second to say, what's in it for me other than this red stuff?
That Esav does not begin to no because I know I'm reading a lot into it, but I have to, okay? And the idea is that these kinds of impetuous decisions don't come out of thin air. You know, I think it comes out of years of animosity that is the animosity is being directed in numerous ways. One against his father and against his brother and against himself, really. I mean, you know, take now I would say this, as an educator, Marlene, you interact with lots and lots of children, okay? Occasionally, God distributes to you a child that is like an unbelievable child, right? A pleasure to teach, that is just a joy. And then there is also a child that is actually not easy to teach for whatever reason, and we have a whole diagnostic tool chest for that. But this child is not capable of sitting for 45 minutes in your classroom to listen to the Parsha. This child is better suited to a field and a soccer match or whatever, and that's it.
But his father was encouraging him to do that. His father loved him. His father kept eating the meat and saying, "Oh, I'll have some more.
Right,
So go out
exactly.
and get me some." And his mother knew it too
Right.
because she had Jacob make the same food.
Right. And so here it's easy for us to blame the parents, okay? And and but I have nowhere else to go, which is here's a situation, and it what I'm saying is that it could have been, we could write this story in 100 different ways so that it doesn't end catastrophically. But it ended catastrophically because information was withheld. There's enmity between the two. There's conflict. There's, mimetic desire. That is to say, I want what you have. I want what you want. And that's probably more realistic. My scenarios are not realistic. It takes an awful lot of courage and awareness and self-awareness to be able to do that. Very few people, I think, are able to do that. And while I would expect this, from extraordinary people, the Isaac and Rebekah are also very human people. Okay.
Yeah,
Rabbi,
but
Yes.
look,
Who-
couldn't Isaac have
That's right.
said, all right, look, you're not suitable for this particular role, certain kind of life, covenant, etc. Instead, I will give you the following in a
Yes.
positive way rather
Yes.
than begrudgingly
Of
and,
course.
again, setting up more enmity between the two of them. I
Of
mean,
course.
like
Yeah.
along the lines of what I think you were suggesting would have happened in a good family.
Right. And here I would point to the fact that while we look to the patriarchs to be exceptional, they're not exceptional in the sense of their ability to handle these psychological things. I'm sorry, they're getting a lot of, I don't know where the noise is coming from. Sorry, I think it's Lana's. I don't know. I'll get you an unmute in a second. The you know I'm tempted to go back all the way to the beginning, which is to say that there was enmity and conflict already among the brothers and Abraham. Abraham, look, there's Terach, and he has three brothers, Avram, three sons, Avram, Nahor, and Haran. Haran dies, and Abraham migrates. Nahor stays. There's conflict between Avram and Nahor. Okay, I can't really prove it other than that one or two verses, but what I'm saying is that if, as a therapist, we were to sit the family in a room and draw out the genogram of the family, okay? The genogram meaning the family tree and where all the conflicts are, I would say, okay, this is very interesting. We start off with Terach. We don't know his wife's name, but Terach has three sons. One dies. That's a catastrophe in the family. There's a migration, a movement. And then it's not that there's enmity between Avram and Nahor, but there's rivalry between Avram and Nahor. Avram is supposed to be special, but he has nothing to show for it. And on it goes. And then there's Ishmael. Ishmael has a rivalry with Isaac. And then there's Jacob. Jacob has a rivalry with Esau. And so any therapist will point to you and say, look at the genogram of this family. Built into the DNA of this family is sibling conflict. Okay. And you could argue built into Genesis is the whole idea of sibling conflict from the beginning right until the end. I often say, Genesis is trying to work this out. And I think the reason why it's trying to work this problem out is because it sees rivalry and enmity among people in the family as the chief source of anguish for human for the people, right? The pe the Jewish
Well,
people. Wait. The Jewish people has one challenge only, always, which is how it can stay a people with not dividing itself. Because at every juncture in its history where it faces crisis, it's always pitted against each other, and that is the darker story of Jewish history, which is we always have these internal battles. Now, Tova, you had something to say. Go ahead.
no, I as a therapist, most
Yes.
of the problems people come, it's family issues.
Exactly.
So it's
Okay.
not only and it's not only Jews.
Yeah.
I mean, the same issues in non-Jews, children problems. You know, Rabbi Hilsenrath once said one thing, which I sometimes quote him, that love flows down. So parents love their children more. Usually the children love the parents.
That's
So
interesting. Yeah.
somehow like that. So I try to say that to them, love flows down and it's natural. But
Yeah.
there is constant, I would say 95% of problems is with family.
Okay.
All across the board, all
100%.
nations.
Or 90%. Yes, absolutely. Ilana, go ahead. And then John, and then Sally, go ahead. You have to mute. I'm sorry. Unmute. Something wrong with your. So Ilana, you're sign out and sign in because your microphone is not working properly. There's something wrong. Getting all. Yeah. You're gonna have to sign out and sign in again. Okay. No, I can't. No. I'm sorry. Ilana, try and sign out and sign in again. Okay. All right. John, go ahead.
Well, you said that there's this history of strife in the Jewish people. It just struck me that Saul Bellow in his book To Jerusalem and Back, I think 1967, speaking to Talmud or some scholar or his own observation, saying that in Israel, if it weren't for the Arabs, the Jews would probably kill themselves.
Well, it's not only Saul Bellow that says that. Plenty people say that. This is we have plenty of conflict within ourselves. And it goes back, all the way to David and Absalom and Saul, and it's really there in the splitting of the kingdom into two. It's one of the things that is one of the demons of Jewish peoplehood, which can and have led to catastrophe. The Second Temple, destruction of the Second Temple. The rabbis pin it on sinat chinam, baseless hatred. But if you read carefully, the accounts of it, it's not only baseless hatred, but it's the way that one group of Judeans really tried to sabotage the other group, and that internal divide led to tremendous weakness. And look, we're living in this moment where many people point to the fractiousness of Israel, in 2023, in the months leading up to October the 7th, and that this was a security problem because there were demonstrations on a weekly basis, and the enemy saw that, and that's where our historical analysis is going to be very important. Look, what are we going to learn from this, if we've learned anything? Susie, go ahead.
Yeah, so if you like zoom out and look at a big picture, you see that even though things are falling apart, there's nevertheless some inching forward in a positive direction. Because Cain and Hevel, as you and I discussed, were likely twins, and one killed the other.
Yeah.
And then you have Yaakov and Esav, and there's no love lost between them, except they do reconcile. Yes. And Esav says he's going to kill him, but he doesn't. And then they reconcile. So you've got this inching forward of some improvement over time.
Sure, indeed. Okay, Ilana, you're back. Let's see if you got it.
Can you hear me?
Yes, good.
Oh my God. I'm probably going to repeat what was said already, but I'm trying to figure out um, so many relationships between parents and siblings and brothers. And from the very, very, very beginning, what is the message that we should learn from this? Because we are supposed to learn from what the Torah is supposed to teach us, like Cain and Hevel. Then the Akedah, sacrificing your son that they waited forever to come, and then the tribes, the 12 children
Yeah.
of Jacob, and even in Kings, Absalom
Yeah.
and David, and is this
Um,
normal or what?
well, so to a certain extent, and Tova just said this, all the problems emanate from family. People, what gives people the most anguish in their lives is are things rooted in their families. And so in that way, the biblical families don't, they mirror many of our own families. Hovering underneath this is the verse in Psalms, Hine ma tovu, but we sing it, Hine ma tovu manayim. Why does the psalmist, exult at that? How good and wonderful it is for brothers to dwell together, because it's not unusual. It's I guess it would be really unusual. We do have a kind of romantic vision of what families ought to be. Um, and I suppose, family where all the siblings get together, wow, that is a kind of, it's an amazing situation, where those families can have, I it what gives God delight is when all God's children can be together, can get along. The same thing as a parent. I think there's no more delight for a parent than to see their children, getting along together. There's no more anguish, I think, for a parent, and when their children don't get along. I think, um, there's nothing more anguishing to a. I mean, yeah, of course, there's, you can have all sorts of illnesses and stuff like that. That's terrible and catastrophic. But the things that you hope for as a parent, one of those things is that your children will get along with each other and take care of each other. And it's tremendously painful. It is, total anguish when that doesn't happen. Stanley, you still have your hand up. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, I had in mind something very similar to what Susie had said, and that I was thinking of the wonderfully dramatic meeting of Jacob and Esau,
Yeah.
where it's true Jacob sort of tries to soften him up and sends his, his family and his goods and whatnot. But the reconciliation between them and they're sort of weeping on each other's shoulders, that's a positive example of how there is the other side too. That is the possibility of reconciliation despite all the, things that I got on before.
Absolutely. And so, yeah, that's where the story does work to that. And look, it also anticipates the story that ends Genesis, which is Joseph and the brothers. Joseph, there is a cathartic weeping
Yeah,
when
exactly.
Joseph reconciles with the brothers. And there's always suspicion at the end too, you know, but we get to the end of the book of Genesis and we feel that this has all been worked out so that the people can be a people. Look, if you take as the bird's eye view of this, what's the goal? The goal here is to make a people. How do you make a people? You start with a family, and the family has the tendency, as all families, to break apart already at the beginning. So it's almost as if you have to force everybody to get together. So in a way, all of these stories are, they have their cleavage, they break apart and they're put back together, and they learn, but how to be a family on the basis of the healing that happens when they're put back together. Okay, so that's the backstory. Let's go to the issues here. We got this thing. So I said at the end of last week's part, Jacob stole the blessing. Esau wants to kill him. Rebekah instructs him to flee to my brother in Haran. Now, so what I'm going to show you here is that there are two conflicting charges at the end of last week's Parsha. One which is the Rebekah charge, and one which is the Isaac charge. Charge means my instruction to you. Okay, we're going to read Rebekah now. Vayistom Esav et Yaakov. Esav held a grudge against Yaakov because of the blessing which his father had blessed him. Vayomer Esav bilibo. Esav said in his heart, let the days of mourning for my father draw near, and then I will kill Yaakov my brother. Okay. Now, Rivka was told of the words of Esav, her elder son. People always ask, I always ask this question, if he says it to himself, how does she know? It's not that he kept it a secret. It's that he had made up his mind, okay? And in making up his mind, this is something that he kind of tips his hand to this. He is very frustrated, and you could dramatize this in any number of ways, including I'm going to kill him. I'm going to kill him. And he's speaking that way, or he's, by himself, I'm going to kill him. I'm going to kill him. I'm going to kill him. And that's what she overhears. And that's what she says. And again, instead of intervening and saying to him, Esav, calm down. It's terrible, terrible. We'll get over it. We'll get through this. No, she doesn't intervene here. And we'll leave off the criticism. Okay. So she was told that about what Esav said, she sent and called for Yaakov, Vatishlach, Vatikra Yaakov. So that means that he's somewhere else, and she's got to get him. Vatomer, she said to him, your brother is consoling himself about you with the thought of killing you. That's the way he's going to be satisfied. So now, my son, listen to my voice. Shema b'koli. And we would do another lesson on Shema b'koli, how that little phrase appears in several places. Abraham is told to listen to his wife's voice. Here, Jacob is being told to listen to me, listen to my voice, hear me, understand me, okay? And it occurs in other places, and that would be useful to compare, but we're not.
Right, listen to the women.
Yes, of course. Hearken to her voice. Barach lecha el Lavan achi harana. Go to my brother, okay? And we have rightly focused on that sibling relationship, that we have two brothers in many occur, but here is the sibling relationship between a brother and a sister, okay? And so we actually don't know a lot about it, except for the fact that we encountered Lavan way back 2 parshas ago in Chayesar, when the servant went to get Rivka, and you recall that whole beautiful story. And it's at the moment that the servant is brought into the household of Bituel that they meet Lavan. And that there is something very conniving about Lavan. And I guess, forgive me for saying this, there's something a little bit conspiratorial and conniving about Rebekah. That in many ways, these two siblings are also cut from the same cloth. Look, I make the case here, okay? And I will put my neck out for it to be sliced, okay? But by doing what she did, by making the plan, by going behind her husband's back, by going behind her son's back, by disguising her son and setting him up for this, she is exhibiting not only some ability to take initiative, but a little bit of deceitfulness, stealthfulness on her own part. And let's just say that may not come from thin air. That's got to come from somewhere. And in some ways, we know of Lavan later on that he is a very stealthful, deceitful character. Maybe there's something similar between Lavan and Rebekah, in the sense that they have a view of the world, okay? I don't know if you recall last year when we talked about the story of Isaac, Jacob at the well, you know, the all the herds come. We're going to see that in a second, and they refuse to uncork the well until everybody's there. And I offered the following hypothesis, which is there's a reason why they don't do that, because they fear they're going to cheat each other out of the contents of the well. You know, they've had experiences already where groups of people have taken advantage of each other. So in that part of the world, there's a lot of suspicion of the way people behave. Okay, so she says, go flee to my brother Lavan in Haran. Stay with them for some days until your brother's fury is turned away, until your brother's anger turns away from you, and he forgets what you did to him. Then I will send, Vishalachti, I'll send for you, and I'll have you taken from there. Ulekachticha misham. I'm not sure if that's the right translation. Ulekachticha, have you taken? I will get you, maybe, but whatever, we'll leave that. For should I be bereaved of both of you a single day? She's afraid that if, in fact, Esav will kill Jacob, that there will be a vengefulness on Esav, and that Esav, in committing an act, let's say, of manslaughter, that his death will be sought for also, and that she will lose two children, two sons. So I'm going to save you for now. I know him. He'll calm down, and after some time, I'll send for you when the coast is clear, when everything is settled down. I'll send you a letter, and you'll come back. Okay? We know that doesn't happen, and that's another puzzle. We'll leave that for now also. Rivka said to Isaac, so now look at the stealth here. Look, I mean, I didn't want to make this class about Rebekah's stealthily, but she says to him, you know, go run for your life. I'll get you when he comes down. And then she turns to her husband and says, I loathe my life. Katzti b'chayai. I can't stand it because of those Hittite women. Mipnei benot chet. Im lokeach Yaakov isha mibnot chet. If Yaakov should take a wife from the Hittite women, lama li chayim. She's a little hysterical here. Why should I have life? What purpose is there to my life? You know, I can't live if he takes a Hittite woman. Okay, all right. Then what happens? That's at the end of chapter 20. What do we say? 27. We go to chapter 28, and Isaac turns to Jacob and tells him to go to Paddan Aram. So we have Rebekah's charge to Jacob, which is run for your life, get sanctuary. Isaac's charge to Jacob is, he blessed him, Vayitzavehu, and he says to him, Lo tikach isha mimatan, don't take a wife from Canaan. Kum lech Paddan Aram, go to the country of Aram, Beta v'tuel, avimecha, go to your grandfather. I'm sorry, go to your, Betuel would be your grandfather, right? Your grandfather's house. Notice that she doesn't say go to your uncle's house. Your grandfather, there must be a whole bunch of cousins, lady cousins. Go pick a cousin. Go pick a cousin, okay? From you know, now names Lavan, your mother's brother. God bless you, make you a host of peoples. Give you the blessing of Abraham. You and your seed. You'll inherit the land. Vayishlach Yitzchak et Yaakov. Isaac sent Yaakov off. Vayelech Paddan Aram. He went to Paddan Aram to Lavan, son of Betuel the Aramean, Achi Rivka, Em Yaakov Esav. So we get all the pedigree there. That's where he goes. And then, where does Jacob end up going? Vayetzei Yaakov mi Beersheva, vayelech Harana. Okay? So we are reading very closely here. Okay? Something that we may have not noticed at all prior to this. Okay? there are two charges here, two sets of instructions, a maternal instruction and a paternal instruction. The maternal instruction is run for your life, and I'll come back. I'll send for you. The paternal instruction is go get a wife. Go get a wife. So we have two things going on here. Okay, it's confusing. And Jacob ends up going to Haran. So is he going to get a wife, or does he end up there accidentally and then gets a wife? And if that's the reading of the story, then how do we understand what takes place at the well? All right, I'm going to stop here and get questions. I got Lana, then Nanette. Go ahead.
Why isn't Rivka worried about Esav getting a wife from the non-Jewish girls? Why is
She
she
is
only worried about
she
Yaakov?
is worried about that. She is, but she doesn't say that to Jacob. She says,
No, to Esav.
"Oh, why doesn't she say that to Esav?"
That yeah, why yeah.
You know,
He's already
because
married.
we already have a note in the
Oh, he's married already?
it does say that he takes a wife from a Hittite wife, but not Beeri. Something like there's a verse that tells us that he marries a Hittite woman, and that it does say that Isaac and they don't like her. They don't like the wife. Okay. And you see this, again, I have a lot of sympathy for him. The verse in the end of last week's Parsha says that Esav saw that they didn't like his Hittite wife. So what does he do? He takes a daughter of Ishmael, okay? And I think it's very clever on his part, thinking, okay, they don't want me to go out of the family. I went out of the family because they're local women, and I wanted to, I just wanted a wife, and they were around. So he went, and he says, "Look, I know that my father Isaac really has a relationship with his brother Ishmael. It's not a severed relationship in the sense that, I mean, it's Abraham that severed the relationship, but you do get a sense that Isaac wants to be in the orbit of Ishmael. And so understanding that this would please his father, he goes to Ishmael and gets a wife from one of Ishmael's daughters. Okay, that's what goes on. Nanette, go ahead.
So to me, I just want to go back to the well for a second. I'm glad that you said maybe 10 minutes ago, you used the word conniving. To me, I think Rebekah was a major conniver. But it's okay. She saw this servant come with 20 camels. I mean, didn't that indicate? And then when the servants decided he liked Rebekah for watering the camels, he gave her all sorts of jewelry. Doesn't that indicate that this guy's wealthy? So
Well,
Rebecca's her a good deal. But
Rebecca,
yeah,
no, it was Lavan that saw the good deal, okay? And what you point out, I think, is really important, which is that Jacob, when he shows up at the well, he shows up with nothing, okay? So this kind of tells us that this story is, I mean, there are a few puzzles that I'm not sure I can answer satisfactorily. One which raised by this issue is, so if Isaac is in fact dispatching Jacob to find a wife, why is he sending them empty-handed? He sends them with nothing. Look, as we saw, and here the Torah, I think, as a text piece of literature, is really setting up for us the story in a way to contrast it with the previous story. It's a well story. We know lots of interesting things happen at wells. So we have a typology that at a well, people meet, etc. But it's also a shidduch story, and so therefore it has to line up like a shidduch story, but it doesn't. Okay, it's almost the opposite, because in the previous story, the servant comes with 10 camels laden with jewels and all sorts of possessions, gifts, etc. And they, this was like, you know, I mean, the movie Aladdin, right? It's like the procession of all the camels. Why are they doing that? He's doing that for show. He's doing that to make it's a demonstration of wealth. Okay, I am showing you what your daughter, sister, that she's going to go to this family. That's a super wealthy family. Okay, so you'll be crazy not to accept this offer. Okay, when Jacob shows up, he shows up with nothing. Now, so if he is being dispatched to get a wife, you would think that he would go with a few coins, but he's got nothing. He says, "I only have my staff."
He's also
That
running away.
so that leads me to conclude that it's really because of running away that he's going, not because of the wife, or at least that the wife is not the official, not the real reason here. It's sanctuary. But now, Bob, go ahead.
I just wanted to say, could the two commands be both complementary and synergistic in the sense that Isaac is looking for the continuance of the family and the tradition going forward, be fruitful and multiply. And Rebekah is basically saying you've got to live in order to do that.
In
So
order
the
to
two
do
to
that.
me are not contradictory, but they go hand in hand. And I don't know if I read this someplace that he actually did leave with wealth, but ran into Esau's brother or
Yeah.
something and was dispossessed en route to save his own life.
Sure. So that's a midrash, I think, where they would say that what does the midrash show? The midrash, the rabbis really can't stand Esav. Let's be honest, okay? Because Esav becomes a symbolic representation of Rome, of the Greco-Roman world, of cruelty, and later Christianity also, okay? And so they have nothing pleasant to say about them. So naturally, they're going to see in Esav a rapist, a pillager, a murderer, the epitome of evil. But so back to the other point which you made, which couldn't you have both of these? And the answer is yes. And in the end, look, he does run away to save his life, and he does, get not only one wife, he gets two wives, two concubines, and produces a whole family, as a result of that. So things do happen. We don't have enough time to really go into making the comparison between the servant story and this story, but here's what I would point out, and we kind of highlighted at the beginning, which is at the well, when the servant gets Rebekah, he's in the middle of praying to God, and then she appears, and he makes this big thank you statement. Baruch Hashem, basically says, "Thank you, God. Thank you. Thank you. Look what you did for me." And here, Jacob doesn't do that. Okay, it's not that he's not thankful, but it's not that there may not be a big plan. Maybe there is a plan, but the things that happen here are a result more of human initiative and the way that people fall in love. And you'll see that it's not because Isaac doesn't have, or Jacob doesn't have, these prayerful moments, other than the moment, the dream sequence where there's this dream and the angels appear, and he then says to God, how amazing this place is. I will, you bring me back, and I will come and tithe this place, and I will build a temple here or build something here. That's it. When he gets there, it's all about him and his own initiative. Go ahead, Marlene. You had to.
Well, I was going to say those two things. One is when he has the dream on the rock, and he then speaks to God, but he's carrying on the family traditions, and maybe that's the way he learned that the younger brother always supersedes the older brother.
Maybe he is, and what do we have? We have already one example. We have Isaac, usurping Ishmael. Maybe maybe he knows the Cain and Abel story. I don't know. And maybe he has intuition, and maybe, I've pointed out, that if this family is, purports to being obedient to God, okay, and that God is part of the life of the family, then they have to know at least one thing about God, which is that there's God and then there's everything else. That nature is outside of God, and that God really is the one that directs things and directs history. But in as much as God directs history, human beings have to act on their own behavior. They have to act on their own volition. And
Well,
these things are always at play here. Yes, go
well,
ahead.
then don't we have to have a list to show to whom God spoke and to whom there was just a dream or there was just family lore?
Yes, and these things, reading closely, we can see that. We can see that God speaks to Abraham and doesn't speak to Abraham, that God speaks to Isaac and doesn't speak to Isaac. God, we have this kind of, we project onto these stories our own aesthetic expectations of what a religious person ought to be like. And that's because we're surrounded by, you know, people who we think are models of religious behavior, who are constantly praying to God and believe that God is constantly speaking to them. That's not how it goes. That's not what happens in the Bible. It's not that God is constantly speaking to people. God, as we saw, speaks to Abraham and doesn't speak to them for years, and that what the human experience is, as far as God is concerned, is it's I want to be you, I want to be next to you, but you're elusive. And you've told me a plan, but I have to make that plan work. I have to deliver on it somehow myself and make that plan conform to what you want. That's what it means to be a human being. I would say that's what it means to be a Jew, which is we're destined to be something in the world. We're destined to bring a blessing into the world. But we can't just rely on God for that. We have to do something ourselves for that. You know, it's like, the joke about the guy who said, the person who wants to be rescued, and he's like, I don't have to go into that. Okay, we have time for just a couple of things left here. Okay. So what happens? He goes to Haran, and we have the escape, the finding a wife. He where does he go? To the land of the Easterners. He doesn't go to Haran or to Paddan Aram. Okay. And at the well, they ask, he says, Rachel is coming. But they say to him, we know her. Okay. I'm going to go back to Rachel came with the sheep, and we get the introduction of Rachel bat Lavan achi imo, Rachel, daughter of Lavan, his mother's brother, his mother's brother, his mother's brother. I learned in preparation for this class that this is a literary technique called epiphora, which is the repetition of a key phrase at the end of a sentence or a phrase. Okay, so now you have trivial knowledge. All right, he kisses her. He cries. I'm going to just go to my questions here. Is it escape or is it to get a wife? It's about getting a wife. We're going to lean to there. Why? Even though we know that the story will end, we argue that the story is about escape and therefore connected to the charge of his mother. When Jacob asked the shepherds where they're from, they say Haran. Okay? What did Jacob tell Lavan? What did he tell him that he was coming to marry? He said, this is where I was going, which say that at the well, Rachel, the sheep, they water the sheep. He goes back to the household. And when you compare the two stories, here is this guy with nothing, okay? And he's telling his story to Lavan. And what does he say to Lavan? And what is supposed to happen there? Later on, so I'm going to close here because I'll just say it in my own words, which is he goes to Lavan and he has to explain to him why he's there. According to this reading of the story, he has to explain to Lavan why that he's a refugee, that he's running away from his brother. He doesn't go to Lavan. Certainly, the way the story unfolds for us, If he was going to get a wife, he would say to Lavan, my father sent me here to get a wife. But he doesn't say that. Instead, we don't know what he says. He says everything. He says, I explained to him everything. And then only a month later, Lavan says, you've been working for me for free. You can't work for me for what do you want? He says, I want to marry your daughter. And that seems to be a surprise to Lavan. So the question is, if he was following his father, this wouldn't have been a surprise. He would have known all along that that he wanted to marry a daughter. So then, what is it that he is telling Lavan? He tells Lavan, I cheated my brother. This is why I'm here. I came here because I got the birthright and I got the blessing, and my brother wants to kill me. I'm running away. So now you're a Lavan, and you have this, your nephew is in your house, and you're giving him shelter, okay? And now he's working for you, you're giving him shelter, and you say to him one day, look, you're working for me for free. What do you want? And then he says, I want your daughter. Okay? And he says, Jacob says, I'll work 7 years for your daughter. Okay? And Lavan, you remember what he says to him? Well, I love that line. Tov titi ota, better I should give him to you than I should give him to someone else, which means I have no other better choice now. And you're my last choice of someone to give my daughter to, okay? And there's no way that I want to give her to you, but I have no other choice. Okay. So like kicking and screaming, I'm going to give my daughter to you, I guess, out of my sense of affection for my sister. All right. And then what happens? He cheats him. He cheats him. Just like, and the marriage, the wedding comes and he wakes up next to Leah. How that happens? Well, we don't know. Okay. How is it that you go to sleep thinking that you're with one woman and you wake up next to the other? I don't know, but that's what happens. And he accosts Lavan and says, what did you do to me? And he says, we don't do that here. We don't give the younger one, we're not like you. And he gives him a smack on the face, basically. And that the only reason why he could do that is because he knows who he's dealing with. And the reason why he knows what he's doing is because Yaakov had to tell him. And the reason why Yaakov had to tell him is because Yaakov was a refugee and was completely vulnerable and had to tell him everything. And so Yaakov is following Rebekah and he's not following Isaac. It ends up by accident and by human initiative and by love that he follows his father. But he intends really to follow his mother. That's my thesis. Susie?
Yeah.
And Bob.
So another teacher of mine said that he thinks that Rachel and Leah were identical twins, and that's why he realized in the morning that their eyes look different, and that's why he recognized her in the morning.
Very clever. That's a good answer. Okay, Bob, go ahead.
I wanted to say that for me, if each of the matriarchs and patriarchs are archetypes, what I see these chapters dealing with is the balance between truth and deception. Everyone there is wrestling with this issue, and in the real world, where there are chameleons, where there's mimicry, where there's deception that sometimes is needed during war, when is lying justified? And so from a Hasidic point of view, if Abraham is chesed, the world can't live by that alone, and the world can't live by Yitzhak with justice and din alone, then you have Yaakov bringing them together. And if Yaakov is supposed to be emes truth, then in fact is part of truth the fact that there is deception in the world, and how do we balance that in the best ethical way possible? And each of these characters throughout all this are dealing with different forms of deception, as you mentioned and others have.
Yes.
So to me, this is a big meditation on that subject for all of us.
I agree. I mean, again, on any level that you look at it, whether it's just the literary level or the symbolic or the mystical, the Hasidic, you're referring to the Sfirot, which is Kabbalistic, which is what the mystics, the Hasidim take from. So, however wherever you find, whatever plane of understanding that you're on, this is about deception and the limits of deception and I think it's repercussions. Look, this as I go back to the earlier conversation, which is it's part of the DNA of this family. But as Tova pointed out to us, there's a DNA in every family, which may not include, deception. It may include, other kinds of, take for example an abusive parent, God forbid. But these things exist, and so we know that they will appear in the next generation in other kinds of behaviors, and character and certain kinds of behaviors that parents have are visited on their children, and that they often get replicated in the next generation. So this deception is part of. I'm going to be, it's not going to be favorable to the maternal line, but it's in the maternal line here. But on the paternal side, there's a different kind of DNA. If you follow the paternal line, which is Sarah and Abraham, so what's the Sarah and Abraham DNA? It's my initiative, human initiative, right? Abraham, I read those stories carefully, and they're all about moving things forward in the absence of, a prime mover, let's say.
Rabbi, I guess my question is the Torah saying that in fact there are positives to deception in certain circumstances?
Sure there is.
So what would that be compared to lying when we're not supposed to?
Okay, so that conversation in terms of do the means justify the ends? Like are you allowed to lie to tell a white lie? The big conversation in the Talmud is about between Hillel and Shammai about a bride, right?
Beautiful bride. Right.
You ever say to a bride, "You're ugly"? So
Not if you want to live.
Shammai says you say it like it is, and Hillel says no. You got to say "Kala na'a v'chasuda." A bride is always beautiful, and you can lie for the sake of a higher truth. That's not, one not to not take that as a license, because each situation obviously calls for its own ethical judgment. But there are, Abraham says this, to save his life, and people deploy these methods, obviously, for higher goals, saving life. And yet, yeah, you do have to sacrifice truth sometimes to save a life, for sure.
There's truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
There you go.
12 states in the United States is not a lie.
Okay. It's a partial truth. All right, we'll leave it there. Thank you, everyone. Everyone have a wonderful week. I hope you had a good Thanksgiving. And